ever since I was a young boy, I have this nagging, pervasive fear that people wouldn't be able to see me, that nobody could know me, that if people really understood who I was, then they couldn't love me. In fact, one of the things that I would do very often is climb my favorite tree in my backyard. And covered by the leaves, I would live out this narrative that nobody could see me. About 4 years ago, I moved back from the Middle East to Ohio. And when I was in the Middle East, I worked for a big international NGO where I did different types of work, interfaith, intercultural type stuff. And the thing is that wherever you go in the world, people are people and life is life. And I know that. But I also know that it's really easy to be taken, to be captive to the shininess of this type of life, right? Where you are internationally traveling, situations are a little dangerous, and maybe there's a vast array of religions and languages wherever you look, right? So when I came back to Ohio, having lived abroad actually reinforced this fear in me. It made me fear once again that people maybe really couldn't see me, that maybe people really couldn't know me, that maybe people really couldn't understand. But this narrative of isolation has always been challenged by a few people in my life. And one of those people is my friend Michael. My friend Michael lives in Seattle, and he has this really weird way of always knowing exactly what the subtext and motivation are for everything that I said. So when a month after I moved back to Ohio, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It wasn't surprising to me that he knew exactly what I needed. I remember calling him, and I remember saying to him, telling him about the diagnosis. I remember him saying to me immediately, the first thing, "I'm coming, I'll be there." And I remember the next day, him sitting in my living room in my apartment, and it was kind of cold in my apartment, but more than the temperature really, I felt this pervasive sense of sadness and uncertainty and fear. And I remember having my head and my face in my hands and just being completely overwhelmed and distraught with the situation that I just learned about. And I remember Michael refusing to give me that empty sentiment of comfort, right? Because he had no idea what was happening. He had no idea the way out of this. And he refused to do that. He refused to give me that empty sentiment. So instead, I remember looking up from my hands and seeing Michael look at me. And I did this a couple of times, and every time I looked up from my hands, he would look at me again, right? And after the third or fourth time, I started to feel a little weird about it, started to feel a little awkward, started to feel a little exposed, because I'm like, what the heck, why is this dude keep looking at me, right? But it also reminded me of a time when I climbed that tree, when I climbed my favorite tree, right? And so you need to know that my favorite book growing up was this book called My Side of the Mountain. Anybody know this book, My Side of the Mountain? So My Side of the Mountain is this book where this little boy, he runs away to the Catskill Mountains. He climbs this ledge, finds a falcon's nest, then grabs the baby falcon, raises and trains this falcon so that the falcon can feed him for his entire time in the Catskills. And when I read this book the first time, I knew I had to have a falcon. I had to have a falcon, right? And so, as I was climbing my favorite tree, I looked up at the highest branch, and up there at the highest branch, I saw this nest. And of course, I was convinced it was a falcon's nest. You guys got it. So this is what happened. I jumped down the tree as fast as I could. I ran to my neighbor's house, Nathan. I said, Nathan, come on, come with me. We're going to get this falcon finally. And we sat at the bottom, the base of the tree, and we looked up in the branches, way high in the air at this nest. And once he saw how high it was, he gasped like that and said, there's no way I'm going up there with you. So I was undeterred, a little angry because he wasn't super loyal, but undeterred. So I said, I'll do it myself. I'm going to go. So I started climbing this tree that I had climbed many times before, but this time the destination was much, much higher, right? And as I started to climb, the branches got a little skinnier and a little skinnier, and the wind started to make the tree sway, right? My heart started to beat a little faster and a little faster. But at the same time, the nest was getting larger and larger, right? So as the nest got larger, I became more and more motivated to keep going. So finally I arrive at the nest. I feel like I'm a mile up in the air, and I look into the nest, and I see 2 bright blue eggs. Now, I was no like stranger to eggs or to nests, so I knew right away this was not a falcon's nest, right? It was a robin's nest. These are robin eggs. So I looked down at Nathan and I said, hey Nathan, and then before I could get out the next word, I realized how high up in the air it was, and freaked out, completely freaked out, and yelled at Nathan and said, Nathan, come up here and help me. But I knew, by the way he was looking at me, his body posture, there was no way he was going to help me. So I did what every good little boy does in that situation when they're terrified out of their mind. I started crying for my mom, right? I was crying for my mom. And I don't remember if Nathan went to go get her or if she actually heard my cries from inside the house. But the next thing I remember is that my mom is sitting at the base of the tree, and Nathan is trying to explain what happened. But before he can finish his sentence, then my mom is right next to me. She's up there on the branch with me. And I'm still panicking, I'm still freaking out, right? When my mom says, take a deep breath, Joe. I see you. Look at me. We can go down together. So I stopped panicking, I stopped hyperventilating, I stopped doing all that stuff, but I was still terrified. So I looked at my mom, and she told me where to put my hands and where to put my feet. I climbed all the way down to the ground. And when I looked back up in the sky at this branch that I thought was a mile up in the air, I realized it wasn't nearly that high. It was actually a lot lower than I originally imagined. And so, recalling that story back to mind while I was sitting in the apartment with Michael, I looked at Michael and I realized that a cancer diagnosis was way more serious than an exaggerated tree, right? And I knew that neither he nor I knew the way out of this. But I was really grateful. I was really thankful that he and I could look at one another and climb together. So that's my story. And at Bespoken, we think that the only way you can make sense of the world is through story. The only way I can know who you are, I can know who I am, I can know who we are together, is through story. Through story, I can be seen by you all, you can be seen by me. And so I thought maybe, if you guys would be game, we could do something a little weird. Does that sound good? Yeah, cool. All right, so what I'd like you to do is to take you through a little simple visualization exercise to try to prompt stories from your own lives. That sound cool? All right, cool. So what I need you to do is I need you to put your feet flat on the ground. And I need you to put your back against the back of the chair and sit up as straight and tall as you can, but still be comfortable, okay? And I need you to take a deep breath in, and a deep breath out, and a deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And I want you to gently close your eyes. Try to bring to mind a place when you were little that you felt safe. Maybe this place is your bedroom, or maybe it is the kitchen table or your grandparents' house, or maybe it's a place in nature like a tree. Try to picture that one specific place, okay? Imagine that you're there. Now I want you to bring to mind a person who sees you, who knows you, who understands maybe more than you would like this person to, but still loves you and accepts you. Bring that person to mind. I want you to allow your body to be filled with gratitude for that person, with gratitude for the relationship that you have with that person. Now, if you can, try to think of a moment when you felt especially seen and known by that person. A moment when that person was able to penetrate through all the faces and the fronts that you project and see the real, authentic you. This doesn't need to be the biggest moment of your life where you felt seen. It can be the moment when you were diagnosed with cancer. It can be the moment where you got scared of being in the tree. That wasn't really that tall. Whatever comes to mind first, that's great. Go with that one, okay? But enter back into that story as if you're watching a movie. Picture who else is there. Picture where you are. Remember the physical and emotional sensations. Remember what happened, the temperature. And let's just stay here for a second and let the whole scene play through. Now, take a deep breath in, deep breath out, deep breath in, and a deep breath out. Go ahead and open your eyes. Now, this next part is really important, okay? I need you to think of, to craft one sentence to tell your story. Only one sentence, though, okay? So if my story that I just told were a sentence, it would be something like, when I was scared and sick, both my mom and Michael saw me and knew what I needed. Okay? So take a second and try to craft a one-sentence story of an explanation of the story that you just imagined. Okay? Doesn't need to be perfect, but just one sentence. No more than 4 clauses or whatever. It's a straightforward sentence, okay? Okay, so I'm trusting that you guys have a sentence, that you guys have a story you're about ready to tell. And it's important for me to say that we are wedded, we are bound to our stories, okay? But it's not as if we're hermetically sealed off in our own worlds, completely unaffected by everybody else. The way that we're able to break through this narrative of isolation is through compassionately listening to the stories of others. Okay? So to that end, what we do at Bespoken is we set all spaces with 3 story listening principles, or guidelines if you want. The first one is listen with your body. Super simple. So when you're talking to somebody and listening to their story, you want to communicate to them with your eye contact and your body posture that you care about what they're saying and you want to hear more. Really simple, right? Number 2, listen with your imagination. What this means is that when somebody is telling you their story, you try to enter into their story by imagining both the physical and emotional sensations that they're describing, by filling out the picture of this one sentence that they're about to tell you, okay? And the third thing is respond in kindness and gratitude. So when somebody is finished telling you their story, what you're going to do is something really simple. You're going to thank them, and you're going to tell them one thing that you liked about their story. That's it, okay? So listen with your body, listen with imagination, respond in kindness and gratitude. So guess what you guys are going to do now? You're going to turn to your neighbor, just groups of two, and I want you to tell the one-sentence story that you came up with from that little visualization exercise. And when that person is finished telling you their story, you should say, thank you. The part that I liked, if I can hit it, was this, okay? And when you're finished, look up at me and be quiet, and I'll continue, okay? So ready, go. Second person should be talking now. Only telling one-sentence stories and responding in gratitude and kindness, please. Okay, thanks for doing that with me. Thanks for that little exercise with me. So I would say if you're interested in the story that was just shared with you, find them after the show and ask them to tell the whole entire story, right? Ask them to tell the entire story. That would be a great thing to do. So at Bespoken, we think that high schoolers, and actually all of us, are facing unprecedented levels of social isolation. And our theory is that through crafted storytelling and genuine story listening, we'll be able to spark an outbreak of contagious hope and belonging. And so that's what we're inviting you all into. That sound good? Can we look at one another as we climb, even if we don't know where we're going? Thank you.